by not answering or by doing the same thing, that is your answer. And it's a form of self-harm to keep going back and asking the person, are we asking for things from people that have never given us those things?
Yeah.
Why would we then expect that they can suddenly give it to us now?
Because a lot of the relationship advice, the reason women don't have domestic equality is because we haven't asked. And it's like every woman has asked, right?
Yeah,
but
we've asked.
If you don't get it and you keep asking, then you have your answer, don't you?
Yeah. That is, the answer's been given if you're asking.
Then you have to decide what you're going to do with that. Welcome to the Goodbye Good Girl Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Casey Edwards, author of Goodbye Good Girl, Hello Me. If you've spent your life seeking approval from everyone except yourself, putting others' needs before your own, and staying silent to keep the peace, this podcast is for you. Whether you're 35 or 65, the question remains, when will you finally be enough? The answer is now. You belong here. Let's begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third Goodbye Good Girl Club. I am really thrilled to have you all here. I will very shortly introduce you to Kemi. I am coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, where I am very fortunate to live on the beautiful lands of the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and to any First Nations people who are joining us. I want to thank all of you for giving yourself, giving each other, and giving Kemi and me this time to fill our buckets and share space and with smart, supportive, and inspiring women. And as I say, every club, joining this club isn't just an act of self-love, it is actually an act of rebellion, because women in our society are so rarely encouraged to do something wholly for themselves. And one woman who has inspired and coached so many women to challenge their good girl beliefs and live more authentic and joyful and empowered lives, and to find the courage within ourselves to ask for what we want, is the extraordinary Kemi Nekvapil. Now, Kemi is one of the world's leading credentialed coaches for female executives and entrepreneurs. She is the author of the international best-selling book Power, which I highly recommend, completely redefines what power can mean to us. Kemi also trained in Texas with Brené Brown and facilitated the Dare to Lead program for 5 years. She is a regular interviewer of industry icons, including Elizabeth Gilbert, Martha Beck, and Marie Forleo. She's also an endurance athlete and a budding flower farmer. And she has a new book out, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, called Grounded Success. Kemi Nekvapil.
Hi, Casey. Hi, everyone. It is lovely to be here with you all. I am here in a very blustery weather system seems to be going on outside. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Welcome, Kemi. It is such a delight to have you here. So let's jump in. So I want to start, Kemi, by talking about asking for what we want. Because when I read The Gift of Asking, your fantastic book, what really struck me in that book was how you challenged the notion that it is noble for women to go without. And so that really is part of the rotten core of the good girl beliefs, right? That we have to give more than we receive, and we can't create a fuss or be too demanding. So Kemi, tell me, why is asking, especially for our need, for what we need, such a radical act for women?
Well, I loved what you said in the introduction, Casey, around for the women not take the time for themselves, and that in itself is a radical act. As women, and those of us that identify as women, we are socialized generally, whether it's within our families, and I've learnt this over the years. It's not always within our families. Sometimes it is actually within society, but we are socialized to believe that our value and our worth comes from being available to others at all time. So when I wrote The Gift of Asking and I started sort of doing that work with audiences and with my clients, I realized that I'd kind of skipped a step, which was so many women didn't even know what they wanted, let alone knowing what to ask, which I think is part of the symptom picture of if you're always available for everyone else, you're not available for yourself and you don't know what you need, which means you can't ask for it.
That really rings true for me. I remember when I became a mother and I had some time and people go, take some time for yourself. It's like, well, I don't know what I want to do with that time because my whole identity was serving the family. So what do we do when we don't know what we want anymore?
Probably the opposite to what most people do. We actually do need stillness and we need space. I think, there'll be some people where they have either had a major health crisis in their life or a loved one has. And so that has given space and time and stillness to work out, what do I actually want in this life that I'm living? As you said, motherhood can be good if our babies sleep. And I remember just having time for a shower a day when I was at home with my young baby. So that was 21 years ago now. But, motherhood can be a time because it can give us an idea of what's really important. So some of us will find that when we become mothers, we are willing to ask for what we want or put boundaries in place in ways that we never would have for ourselves, but we will for our children. So I think it's different for different people, but generally some sort of space, some sort of either pivot in life or readjustment allows us to really clarify not what should be important to me that I want or need to ask for, but actually what is important to me, what matters the most.
That is such an important distinction because we get a lot of shoulds, don't we?
Oh, yeah, shooting all over ourselves.
Yeah.
It gets very messy, the shooting all over ourselves.
So is a list of beliefs that I've pulled out from your books, which are essentially fears, really, the fears that we have when we ask that we will be seen as too demanding or too greedy or too selfish or people won't like us, right? And these are legitimate fears that hold us back, right? Yeah. So if someone here feels terrified about asking for what she needs, where should she start?
Once again, it's so, it's so interesting in these kind of situations like this, because obviously everyone has a completely different biography, story. They've been doing personal development for different lengths of time. And as a coach, one thing I don't do is give advice. What I can do is share stories. So whenever one of the most surprising clients that I worked with, let's call her Dina, because I saw the name Dina come up here. And she was a woman that I worked with. She was probably in her mid-50s. So, and that was maybe 10 years ago. So she'd be 65. So she was definitely of the generation of women where your job was to be available and present to your husband and your children, and that was it. And we were doing some work around self-care, and she had decided she was going to take herself out on a date to her local restaurant. And her ask, because I said, what do you want to ask for on this date? She said, my ask is to sit by the window. Like whenever I go with my friends or family, we're always on and up, but there's like this prime spot by the window. So that was the ask that she was going to make. That was the action for the week. When we then spoke a week later, she'd asked for the window. That was fine. She had told the waiting staff that she was there on a date on her own. And she said, they treated me so well. She said, but actually it's when the menu arrived. Well, I was getting a little bit emotional. The menu arrived and she looked at it and she realized that for the whole of her life, she had never ordered the meal that she wanted. So growing up, she had a very dominant father and an anxious mum. So she would just go with whatever was going on. When she got married at 19, she would always defer to what her husband wanted. Or if there were other extended family members around the table, she would choose what one of them had chosen so that it wouldn't be any different. She said, I think this is the first time I chose a meal that I wanted. And I said to her, what did you choose? And she said, dessert. She didn't for dessert, because suddenly there was this freedom. And I think this is the thing, if we don't always know the things we're not asking for. Another one, it's kind of food-based, but I trained as a baker and I was a chef for many years. So Another one was a woman who got a sandwich. Basically, she was a corporate worker. So she was going to the same sandwich place every single day. And she would always pick out the tomatoes. She hates tomatoes, but would never say, could you please take out the tomatoes?
Right. Yeah.
But you said she's being a burden. She's wasting their time, all of these things. The day that she did actually decide to go up and say, could you take out the tomatoes? The owner, who obviously saw her and they had a little bit of banter and rapport, said, thank goodness, because we've been wasting tomatoes.
Yeah.
We all know you don't like tomatoes because you've never eaten them, you know. So it can be really little. We think the asks have to be for a raise or for the this, for the that. Sometimes every single day we are not asking for the small things that we need.
Mm-hmm. And do the small things add up? Like, do they add up to our whole identity?
I think for some people they will, for some people they won't. Every single ask we are worthy of, though. Like I talk a lot about in The Gift of Asking, we are worthy of every ask. Now, we cannot control the outcome. We cannot control if somebody is upset about what we've asked for. And we might get onto like the different ways that we can ask for things. But what I talk about in the book, it's not so much only about the asking, it's also about the impacts when we don't ask, because they're really big and they erode our sense of worthiness.
So let's talk about those. What are the impacts?
Have you got them? Because it's so funny, isn't it? You know, you've got 10 books. I've got 4. Mine, that was 2 books ago. No, I actually did get it. I did get it ready just in case you asked. So the impacts when we don't ask for what we need and want are that we're left feeling unfulfilled. We're left feeling disappointed. We hope instead of do. We feel lonely. We have a lack of sense of worth. We withdraw and we shut down. We nag. We test, you know, where we're testing. Well, he didn't call me for my birthday, but I'll see if he does. So we test instead of saying, would you just call me for my birthday? Suffering and causing others to suffer, being resentful, being judgmental, gossiping, feeling disempowered, blaming others, being angry, and generally just not being a very nice person to be around.
Yeah. Yeah, I really resonate to the resentment.
Oh, I'm that one too. That's
Yeah.
I have I call it my resentment radar,
Yeah.
which is why at this stage in my life, I am nowhere that I don't want to be.
I feel like that too. When I'm resentful now, I think that's on me.
Yes, that's where the power comes from. The
Yeah.
power is we can go, why did they call me at that time? Why did they not? What? No, 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 no. It's not about them. Actually, what is it that I did not communicate that had that happen? Which is generally around boundaries. And also then again, as women, it can be difficult to put in boundaries because then we're not a good girl. Then we're
That's
not
right.
and people don't like us. And it's this cycle that just kind of keeps repeating.
And I think the other thing is there's no one and done. There's no, okay, I'm going to decide to ask now. I'm going to decide to not be a good girl anymore. For me, it is a daily practice. And the resentment is my canary in the coal mine that I need to come back to myself and reinforce my boundaries again.
Yeah, I call it my resentment radar, and I feel it in my body. Like I actually, and it's even someone will ask me something and I can feel my tooth lock. And that's my physical sign of you don't want to do this. So don't say that you do.
Yeah, it's quite life-changing to realize that other people aren't doing it to you.
Yeah.
Because once you realize that it's you, then you can stop it.
Yeah. Or that it's a dynamic that has been created, you know, so it's not the other person's fault, but in relationships, there has to be at least one other person. And there's a dynamic that has been created. And it's what I find with my clients that are fixers or people pleasers, is that they think, oh, everyone always wants me to help all the time. It's like, well, actually, generally, no one actually asked you. That's just how you've learned to be available all the time to get your worth and your meaning and your sense of belonging. But generally, that isn't always the case. So I like to talk about this idea that we co-create relationships. And when we change who we are, the dynamic changes. And as you say, it takes practice. Even though I wrote the book, The Gift of Asking, there are certain things that I will ask for. My husband and I were out for dinner the other day, and I was like, you know, because I used to be a chef. So I know, and for anyone here, when it comes to food, the kitchen will let you know whether or not they're happy to exchange the avocado for the potatoes. But if you want that and you're paying for a service, generally us in the kitchen, we wanted to give meals that people wanted to eat. Otherwise, we're wasting food. And so, you know, I'll always say, I'm one of those nightmare, some people would say a nightmare. I will say, oh yeah, could you swap the tomatoes for the potatoes? But then, do you know the avocado from there? If you could bring that up and bring that first. Now, generally people go, we can't do that. And I'd be like, not a problem. Or they go, yeah, I'll ask the chef and it's fine. So generally people aren't booed out of restaurants and cafes. No one throws the tomatoes at them. And I haven't heard of anyone yet being barred from a place for asking for what they wanted. And
Okay.
I use those examples because they are small in the implementation, but sometimes the impact can be really big because we're not asking because we think it's going to have a negative impact. And generally it actually opens up other things.
So there is our first baby step, all of us. Try asking for what you want in a cafe, right?
A cafe. Yeah.
Yeah. That's our first training wheels, learning to ask.
Yeah.
But as you said, we don't always get the answer that we want.
Mm.
And in a cafe, the stakes are low. It's just a no,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the response can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do in those situations? Or
Cry.
Okay.
Cry. Feel the feelings.
Yeah.
Feel the disappointment. For me, I would then check in, what is it I'm disappointed about? Because sometimes we ask the wrong person for what it is that we want. Sometimes, and I say this in the book, but I say this often, people will say, but what if I've asked the person so many times? And I was like, then you have your answer.
Yeah.
Just that it's painful.
Yeah.
Have your answer. They are, by not answering or by doing the same thing, that is your answer. And it's a form of self-harm to keep going back and asking the person for something. It's what one of my coaches used to say, don't go to the butcher for bread. And it is so powerful. We have to look within when we're asking for things. Are we asking for things from people that have never given us those things?
Yeah.
Why would we then expect that they can suddenly give it to us now? Sometimes they can, it takes time, whatever. But if we find that pattern, I definitely think we have to feel the grief and the disappointment and the upset and maybe the anger that comes from that. And then sometimes it's a case of, let's just go to the idea of a raise. It may be, okay, I understand that for whatever reason, that's not going to happen now. Can we come back to this in 6 months? That's another ask. It would be that you might skulk out of the room thinking, what's the point, blah, blah, blah. But actually, there's another ask that can be asked.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the next level is, what was it about it that was a no? Was it the time? Was it the venue? Was it the team? And then that person can kind of go, oh, all of it was fine. It's just that my child is going to be having a baby that week. So I can't put anything in the calendar. So we can ask more questions.
I also like the idea of what you say, that sometimes you get your answer by the repeated no. And I think that's really important, particularly in relationships, because a lot of the relationship advice, which really concerns me, is this idea that the reason women don't have domestic equality is because we haven't asked. And it's like every woman has asked, right?
Yeah,
but
we've asked.
If you don't get it and you keep asking, then you have your answer, don't you?
Yeah. I would say definitely within that realm, that is definitely the case, because sometimes the ask could be for more emotional availability from your partner and they don't give it to you. And then the ask is, can we do therapy together, or would you consider therapy, which then may open them up to emotional availability. But with the example of domestic chores, that is, the answer's been given if you're asking.
And then you have to decide what you're going to do with that, right?
Yeah. And that's the other thing, Casey. Sometimes we don't ask. I had a client once, I think I talk about her in the book, who, I think we've all been there. A relationship ends, but has it really? So she's in that limbo. And I said, if there was an ask, what is the ask that you would want to make of your ex-partner? She said, I want to ask him, is this over forever or is it just over for now? But she was too scared to ask the question because she didn't want the answer because it was going to be painful. Mm-hmm. And she did ask the question at some point in our work together, and the answer was, it's a no forever. And although it was painful, at least she knew. And then she could have the grief and she could have the disappointment and the anger, and then she could move through that into something else. Because what was actually more painful was the limbo of the not knowing and the very loose boundary she's had of, he can't come round, oh, well, actually come round, and, all of this sort of stuff. So sometimes we don't ask because we know the answer. Actually, we just don't want to hear it.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it's better to rip the Band-Aid off quickly, right?
Yeah. And then have some sort of support system. There are certain asks that I've made in my life since writing the book where I've been very nervous about the ask. And so I've set up a friend. I said, I'm going to make this call, or I'm going to send this email, and then I'm going to need to call you straight away.
Right.
Yeah. Just to kind of either the woohoo, you did it, or the, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that. Yeah.
Before we continue, I want to tell you about something that might help you on your own journey. If today's conversation is resonating with you, you might want to check out my book, Goodbye Good Girl, Hello Me. It's my personal story of recognizing and challenging the beliefs that kept me seeking everyone else's approval instead of trusting myself. Think of it as a roadmap to the person you were always meant to be. And if you're a parent, grandparent, carer, or teacher who wants to protect your children from inheriting these damaging beliefs, I've also written Raising Girls Who Like Themselves and Bringing Up Boys Who Like Themselves, both bestsellers that show you how to raise kids who value themselves from the inside out. You can find all these books at caseyedwards.com. And if you use the code podcast at checkout, you'll get $10 off your order. Absolutely everything we hope and dream for ourselves and for our children in our lives become easier when we like ourselves. Now, back to our conversation. I want to move on to worthiness now, which we've touched on a little bit. And this whole idea of so many of us growing up feeling like we're not worthy, feeling like we're not enough, and not knowing how to fix that. And there was a quote in your book that really struck me when I was reading your book. I'll just read it. It's, "The action of asking for what we need catapults us into a place of worthiness and value." And so what I got from that quote is that worthiness is a doing word. It comes from taking action. It doesn't come from sitting around waiting for someone to bestow worthiness on us.
No, in fact, waiting for someone to bestow worthiness on us leads the complete opposite of feeling worthy. Yeah, and this is the thing, like asking is an action out there in a world. It's so easy to just kind of stay in our head and we have these insights, but if we don't actually do something about it in the world, nothing is going to change. And to clarify, the response to the ask has nothing to do with our worthiness. It's the fact that we asked that builds the worthiness.
Yeah. And I think if you are listening to this and you have struggled with your worthiness, as I have, it's really not surprising that we grew up waiting to be worthiness bestowed on us. Because when we grow up believing or being taught that, say, beauty was the most important thing about us and that defined our worth, like that's an external measure. So we have been trained since childhood to look for external measures, looking for someone else to decide our beauty, decide our worth. And so it really is, it's a decision each of us needs to make to reclaim that power, right?
Yeah, and that's an example. And I also think about academia as a big one for people as well. Like I was talking to somebody the other day who's about to do her third PhD. And I said, "Oh, how many PhDs do you need?" And she said, "Oh, probably until I feel worthy." Like we were kind of having a joke about it.
Yeah.
Academia, as you said, beauty, like external, especially body measures for women, but also the one that's always happy, like I'm the fun one. And I always have such empathy for the one that has to be fun all the time, what that must be like at night when you lay your head on your pillow and you have all of the human experience of emotions, and yet you feel that your worthiness only comes from being the fun one and the happy one, and how isolating that can be. So there are different ways that the world has told us that we have to be worthy, and it can impact us all in different ways in different seasons of life. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when we break those roles that we're given, that we believe is required for us to feel worthy, there can be a backlash, right?
There's people get upset. That's great, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's the raising my kids. I wanted to show them that they were allowed to have the full spectrum of human emotions, and one of the ways for them to know that was for them to see me have the full range of human emotions. And one way that I would acknowledge theirs is that, I don't know, let's just say they said, "Oh, mummy, can I have, I don't know, the sweets, whatever?" And I'd say no. And they might have a tantrum. And I would just say, "I can see that you're really upset." And that's it.
Yeah.
I don't need to make it better. I don't need to say, "Oh, but tomorrow you're going to see Tommy," or just like, you ask for something, it's a no, and now you're upset. That's okay. I get upset sometimes when someone says no to me. That is absolutely normal. So it's also, this thing that we we can ask for what we want, someone can say no, and then we need to allow other people to have their feelings about the thing that we have asked for and leave them to it. Because sometimes we rush in, and I know with my work as a coach, I'm very practiced at silence. A lot of people are not. They're very uncomfortable with silence, and we want to fill the space. So we'll ask for something and then we'll straight away take it away. So an example, I'll just make it up, Casey. When my book comes out, Casey, could you join me on a world tour around the world? But you don't have to if you don't want to. And actually, that's probably not going to work because I know that you've got lots of things going on anyway. But if you could, you don't. Oh, I could ask somebody else, and you're just like, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. And when we're confused, we say no. So there's something in asking. I call it clean and clear asking. And then we leave it with the other person. And depending on who they are, I had one client, she said, my husband processes things really slowly. And I've learned in our 20 years together, if I ask him a big thing, he will need a week. And she used to push it. And when we don't know, we say no. So now she knows I'm going to ask the thing and I'm going to give it a week. And then he can come back, considered, process, as opposed to her making him wrong. But you should know. Why did it take you so long? I need to know now. And that works for them in their relationship. So we ask, but then we also have to allow other people to work out what their answers are. And being upset is perfectly valid.
Yes. And I have learned through my own process of asking is that, and because I don't fear it anymore, because I've realized that the disappointment doesn't kill me.
Yeah, that's right. We've all survived a no.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It doesn't feel good, but it passes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real gift for the way that you raised your children to actually be able to sit with that disappointment without either distracting them, which is a very common parenting strategy. So then they grow up and they're so fearful of the no, they don't ask. Or we overlay anger and shame for them being upset. So we up the stakes. So then they become even more fearful of asking. So I think, the idea of just practicing being okay with a no is really empowering.
Yeah. And also just being able to, we honor it for ourselves and we honor it for our children or the people that we care for, just kind of going, I completely understand that you're upset about this. We just want someone to validate our experience, but we don't necessarily want someone to take the experience away from us. We think that if we make the person happy or we distract them, that it makes it better. It's like, no, they actually need to get to where they need to get to. And it might not have anything to do with you, which is why another asking question, which is kind of within the realm of relationships, is I will say to my husband, not often, because he married me so that I could be in relationship with him, but sometimes he'll come to me with something and I'll say, do you want a wife? Do you want a wife's response or do you want a coach? I do the same with my friends. Do you want my coaching hat or do you want a friend? Because if it's a friend, I'm going to go, you've got to leave him. I cannot even believe you were with him that long. But as a coach, I'm like, how are you feeling about your relationship right now? It's very different. So sometimes it's asking, do you just want me to listen?
Yeah.
Or are we going to be brainstorming solutions? And I cannot tell you how many people, if you ask, will say, could you just listen?
Right. That's such a great question. I've never asked it before, Kemi, but I will.
Yeah. And people know. That's the thing. People know. I think we disempower people and we think that we have all the answers for them. We don't. Yeah. We're just projecting onto them what we think they should do or what we did once or the mistakes we made, and it's got nothing actually to do with the person in front of us.
Yeah. You could go back and whisper something into the ear of your 20-year-old self. What would it be?
My 20-year-old self. Well, at that time, I was working as an actor at that time, and I was exposed to a lot of personal development in a way that I hadn't been before. And what I started to realize from the books people were starting to share with me, the power of books, and the people around me, I would whisper to myself at 20, that thing that you were told that you had to just deal with the cards that life dealt you was a lie. Start creating the life that you want with the resources that you have, the resources that you may need to acquire, with the skills you have, with the skills that you'll need to acquire. But this idea that life is a game of cards and we get dealt a hand and you just have to make the best with what you have was a lie. That's what I would tell my 20-year-old self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that ties back beautifully to what we were talking about with worthiness, that if you grew up in a family where worthiness was not something that was encouraged to bloom within you, then you can change those cards in adult life. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just in terms of what opportunities are available, what relationships can feel and look like. Um, if there's a lots of negativity in your household, just to know that life can be joyous. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? That actually you don't have to talk about people behind their back. That's not like a thing. Doesn't have to be a thing in the way that people relate to each other. So just that thing of kind of at 20 years old, just starting to kind of unpick. And funnily enough, it then had me leave my acting career, which I was very successful in as an emerging actor, because I suddenly realized, oh, this actually isn't the space that I want to be around all the time. I don't need to prove myself because I have a skill in this area and people are accepting me and they're enjoying me doing it. And I just wanted the acceptance. But then when I realized, oh, I have a journey of accepting myself, when I started that journey, it was like, it doesn't really matter what other people find acceptable about me. What's important is what I find acceptable about me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Kemi, I would like to talk now about your new book, Grounded Success.
It is a woman's guide to cultivating success on her own terms.
Mhm.
And the whole book is basically a permission slip to know that you're worthy and that we are enough and that success, it's exploring what success is if it's not based on capitalism.
Right.
And that this idea of capitalist success is all external and it's bigger, more, faster, always relentless. And the book is through the lens of nature. So as you said, I am actually at my farm and I'm a very early stage flower farmer. And I spend a lot of time in nature as a runner as well. And so every chapter starts with a story from nature. And then I feed that into what would success look like in this area of your life. It's really stripping away what we're told success should be in the same way that I did with power. It's
Mhm.
flipping the narrative to have us know that who we are is enough. And with all of my books, there are always coaching questions going through. And with power, I've asked women, 10 women. The youngest is 27, the oldest is 75. And I asked them the questions. What were you raised to believe success was? Did you achieve that form of success? How did it look? How did it feel? And what is success to you now? And it
Mhm.
is incredible to see from that's such a different generation, 27 to 75. It's very different from any of the other books out there about success, except for maybe Emma Gannon's book, who's also in my sort of writer friendship circle. She wrote a beautiful book called The Success Myth, that all she looks at what are the myths of success, but once again, looking at the opposite of more, faster, bigger.
Mhm. I love that, Kemi, because the idea that we can actually define our own success is also a radical act.
Oh, it is. It really, really is. Yeah, I mean, and it's so much for me, being a writer and loving languages. I know that you do as well, Casey. There are so many narratives around what it is to do good work or to be at work, or people also often say to me, "You must be so busy." It's like, I am not busy. I am not a nice person when I'm busy. I cannot focus on the things I want to focus on when I'm busy. I have the privilege in that I have my own business. And I think for any business owners here, most of us create our businesses to give ourselves flexibility and freedom and those things. But unless we set it up in a way, it can be exactly the same as not having flexibility and freedom. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
and that's a rolling thing as we have to pivot businesses depending on global situations and all that sort of stuff. But all these narratives around, there's a whole thing around busyness and what that takes away from us, going back to that idea we need to be still enough
Mhm.
to work out what we want. So even in the book, there are nature practices that put us into a sense of stillness. They're very simple, but it's just like giving yourself some time to work out what is important to me in this season of my life right now. What am I
Yeah.
tending? What am I weeding out? What am I pruning? What am I cultivating? And all of these kind of ideas, because we're a part of nature. And I believe that any form of success that we want to grow for ourselves has to be grounded in human nature.
That just sounds so wonderful. It sounds like the antidote that so many women experience. We are all just so tired, aren't we? And we're so tired because we're chasing after someone else's definition of success.
And I remember actually a client that I was working with in my group coaching last year. And she had we were talking about success and motherhood and going back to this idea of parenting. And she realized that the success model that her mum had given her and that she had witnessed was the one where as long as everything on the home front was impeccable, then you're a successful woman. Now, the thing is that my client is an incredible journalist and has an incredible Australian career, like you would know her. And so for her to have an impeccable home was not like, she couldn't be a full-time journalist and have an impeccable home. So for her, she could feel the shame and everything from her mum. She stopped sharing things with her mum about what was going on in her life. And she realized that she was tending a success that had nothing to do with her. And one of her big conversations with her mum, without shaming her mum, acknowledging, I understand that the way that you were raised, and I love how you raised us and that you were home all the, but actually I'm different. And I love my children. I want to be present to them when I'm there, but I don't feel that being a successful mother is being there all the time. I had that. I did not feel that making every single packed lunch that my children needed to have was a mark of me being a good mum. I felt being a good mum was having them make their own packed lunches from when they were 4 years old. Because I wanted to raise independent children. I wanted to raise independent children. I knew I had to start early.
That idea of having a perfect home as part of women's success is such a burden for so many women. And I remember making a conscious choice, thinking there are only so many hours in my week. And if I spend them cleaning my house, then I'm not going to be doing this, this, and this. And I have to constantly remind myself that, because I do still feel the pressure.
Yeah, it is. It's the internalized. That's the thing we have to work out. We have this internalized patriarchy. When I started my business, my kids were at school. I'd do the school drop off, come home, tidy the house, and then I was ready. And then it was like 12:30. Oh, I've got to pick up the kids in 90 minutes. So what I had to work out was my study needed to be clean because my brain works in organization, but the rest of the house could wait for when the children came home, and I'll just kind of pick up and potter around them as they were doing their things. But yeah, that is definitely a thing. We waste a lot of time as women in that idea. I was very happy to be a good enough mother, good enough mother.
You spoke of labels such as being the fun one or the organized one, the silence filler. Once we recognize this in ourselves, how can we start to transition away from being that person, moving away from feeling the responsibility of being the fun one?
It is a practice, and do not underestimate the fact that you're aware of it. Do not underestimate, now that you know that maybe that is the identity you have created for belonging. We all want to belong. We all want to feel valued. It is important. I've always worried about people that said, I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm like, okay, that's concerning. That's kind of social. That's not going well. Okay. We do care. And so we all take on identities to feel valued and belonging. So I would say you're aware of it. Tomorrow, just be aware of yourself in spaces and places with people. See where it comes up. And then you'll just start to maybe shift it by starting to say to people, I'm not having a good day today. But what's interesting about that is this co-creation, this dynamic. People aren't used to the happy one having a bad day. So it takes them a while to adjust. Oh, but you're always fine. And then we go, oh yeah, I'm fine. Or we go, I'm actually not having a good day today. You know, that we do sometimes, if we're part of the dynamic and we're the one doing the work, we do have to kind of we have to press a little bit harder for people to realize, hey, things are changing and I'm asking for something different in this relationship. But don't underestimate awareness. You know, as a coach, yes, action is a part of my work, but sometimes the most important thing is just being aware of it, and then actually actions start to change anyway.
I also think, so for me, because I have gone through that process myself, that finding and defending my authenticity is not just a gift to me, it is a gift to my friends, because what I learned at a 7-year-old friendship skills workshop was that friendship can only occur between two people being themselves. And if we are performing that role that we think we always have to be, we're not being ourselves. So we are actually denying our authenticity, which is the foundation of our friendships. Kemi, thank you for sharing your heart and your work with us. It was really inspiring and empowering. We are so honoured to have you. And thank you, everyone, for coming and joining our club. It just makes my heart sing to have this community of women.
Thank you, Casey. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Goodbye Good Girl Club today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your words help other women find this community, women who, just like you, deserve so much more than they've been settling for. And please share this podcast with the women in your life who need to hear these conversations. Send it to your sister, your mom, your best friend, your colleague, anyone who's been putting everyone else first for far too long. If you want a roadmap to saying goodbye to your own good girl, you can grab a copy of my book, Goodbye Good Girl, Hello Me, at caseyedwards.com. Use the code podcast for $10 off this book or my parenting books, Raising Girls Who Like Themselves and Bringing Up Boys Who Like Themselves. Until next time, you don't need to earn your worth. You just have to remember it. This is the Goodbye Good Girl Club. I'm Casey Edwards. Thank you for being here.